Hello, beautiful people. How are you? My name is Gloria Lorraine. You can call me Lorraine. Some people call me Glow. Either way. On Tuesdays, I sit down and we talk about true crime. So if it's something that you like, let's go. Today, we're going to be talking about Jazz and Taz, Jasmia and Tasmia, the Whitehead twins. So we are going to 2010, Connor, Georgia. On January 13th, a police officer was doing his regular paroles in a gated community, and he noticed a young girl running towards his police car, out of just very frantic, out of breath, telling him, barely able to get it out, saying that something happened to their mom, that he needed to come into the house. So he goes back to the house, and he did say that this was one of the more gruesome crime scenes that he had ever seen, that he could instantly smell the iron from the blood. That's how much it was, and it was kind of all over the place, as on the walls, on the carpet. So he calls in, and he begins to get back up, and he's trying to get the girls out of there, grab them together. She had a twin sister, so that they don't have to endure any more of it. And on the way over there, they could just see how disgruntled they are. One of them was biting herself as a soothing tick. And once they got to the police station, they were starting to ask them questions like, okay, can you just break it down to me as far as like what happened? And they just said, we just came back from school. We don't really know what happened. Like, we found her in the tub like that. And they're asking them, okay, do you know anybody that would be trying to hurt your mom? And they said, well, she has a boyfriend, Robert, but she also has like a little side piece too. His name is Joe. And they were arguing last night, but I don't know. And they're just like, okay, do you need anything while we wait? They're trying to get everything together. Can I get you anything while you wait? And the girls said, yeah, I want to watch CSI while we wait. And the police officer said he instantly got chills down his spine because he knew something was off with the two girls after they had just stepped out of a gruesome crime scene. That is the first thing that they wanted to see, was more gruesome crime scenes. Now, to the beginning, the woman in the bathtub was a woman by the name of Jamaica. They called her Nikki for short. Nikki was described as a fireball, life of the party. She was actually a hairdresser. She was born on 4/18/75, which makes her an Aries. And she was just a fun person to be around, is what they said. She did have a hard life growing up. She was actually born in prison by a woman named Linda, and Linda unfortunately was in prison for substance abuse, and she was not able to take care of Nikki, so she ended up sending Nikki to her mother's house. Her mother was a woman by the name of Della, and she raised her, but Nikki was just, again, a fireball, kind of played by her own rules, and she did end up getting pregnant with identical twins, two little girls, Jasmia and Tasmia, and they called them Jazz and Taz for short. Now, Jazz and Taz were born on November 27th, 1993, which makes them a Sagittarius. And the girls were described as good girls. Della had raised them, and Della was doing good with them, as she had them in tennis, dance, music. They were straight A students. They were described as, the perfect little girls. But Nikki was always in and out of their life. Nikki was still a young mom, and she just was kind of still living her own life rather than making the little girls her priority. So she ended up leaving them with Della. So their great grandmother was taking care of them. The girls described it as they really enjoyed their life with Della. Much they didn't have much resistance when it came to living with Della. They really enjoyed everything that they had. Nikki met a gentleman by the name of Robert. He was a truck driver. He was actually 30 years older than him, and I think that just falls into Della not I mean Nikki not having a father, going to be with a man that was 30 years older than he helped her get back in school. She was exceeding in her hairdressing business, and it was said that Nikki continued to go out and get her a little side piece, but the gentleman, the truck driver, was kind of like, as long as you're a wife when I'm in town, that's what it needs to be. And that's what it stayed at. She was 30 at the time, so she was still kind of living her party life, but she felt that Della was getting older, and she felt that now was the time that the girls could come and stay with her, being that she had a little bit more stability in herself. And the girls were coming into 13 and they were becoming teenagers, so she felt like she wanted to help them through that process of becoming a woman. So in 2005, the girls ended up coming with Nikki, and for some reason the girls kind of just resented this so much, because the girls had this, you've never really been there, so why are you trying to come now? And Nikki was still in her party phase, but she still felt that she could give the girls a better life. So the girls began to act out, starting to see boys, and they were starting to use medicinal marijuana. Medicinal. But Nikki kind of cut that. And I'm not too sure if they started doing it while they were with Della, but Della kind of was just older and kind of didn't pay mind to it. And Nikki was the one that was like, no, you're not doing that. Like, I was young too. Like, you can't play me. You're not doing that with me. And she ended up started noticing on how they were on their phone a lot more, and boys started getting involved. She ended up finding out that Jazz was talking to a 19-year-old boy, and she was not for it at all. In 2018, she found out that Jazz was skipping school to be with her 19-year-old boy, and she was 13, 14 around the time, talking to a 19-year-old. And I guess she just freaked out about it. She ended up going to get Jazz, pulled her out of this boy's house. She ended up finding out where she was, and she was just trying to make her not follow her footsteps. Like, as a child versus an adult, and I'm sure if y'all have children, y'all know that, like, you are so terrified that your children do the exact same thing that you do. Well, this was Nikki, and Nikki did live a very hard life, and she felt that she was able to give the girls such a better life, but the girls were yet following in her footsteps, and she just hated it. Nikki just like was not for it. So she ended up pulling Jazz out of this boy's house, and it was said during the car ride home of this altercation, Jazz threw herself out of the car. And I can only imagine the frustration for her to throw herself out of the freaking vehicle. And they ended up making it home, but this was the night that Nikki ended up finding herself barricaded because it came out that these girls would gang up on Nikki. They would physically fight her. They would physically fight their mother because Nikki was the one that was kind of like the stopper, like, you're not doing this. And the girls didn't like the authority that she thought she had, so they would physically attack her. They would physically beat her up, bite her, and it got to a point where Nikki began to lock herself in the room. At night of when they got home from her pulling her out of her boyfriend's house, Nikki ended up calling the police. When the police officer arrived, they did an interview with her, and when she walked in, Nikki came out just disgruntled, hair messed up. She can tell that she had been in an altercation. But then when she saw the twins were picture perfect. Picture perfect. Their hair was nicely done. They go into their rooms and she saw them innocent. She saw these little girls innocent. And like she said, that she had looked in their closet and they had the nicest of the nicest stuff there. They were very well mannered. And she looks at these little girls, and then she looks at Nikki, and she's just like, okay, something's off. Something's like really off about it. And then the girls were just kind of like brushing her off, like, it's okay, we'll be able to handle it, we'll be okay. And so the police officer, although she didn't feel okay, she ended up leaving. Nikki walks her out, and she's just like, okay, maybe we got it under control. And Nikki ends up walking her out. The police officer said that she knew in her gut something wasn't right, so she waited outside of their house. And she said not even 5 minutes of her sitting in her vehicle, she could hear screaming, yelling, and there was another altercation in the house. So she comes back, and then she catches the girls physically fighting their mother, ganging up on their mother, and she takes the girls in. So they go into juvenile court, and they get what they want. They pretty much all together didn't want to stay with their mom. Like, they felt their mom was kind of ruining what they got going on. So they ended up, and Nikki was just kind of fed up at this point. She's just like, you know what? You can go back with your great grandmother. And Della at the time was 81. So she was getting pretty up there in age. And I feel that the girls knew that it wouldn't be a fight to get what they wanted when they were at Della's house. So they ended up going back. And Della was saying that she couldn't handle the girls. Like, it is what it is, that the girls were able to run over Della, unfortunately. And the girls would start stealing from Della. And it got to a point where Della was saying, no, I need to lock my doors when I go to sleep at night, because they would steal from her and take the car. So they were just like, no, she can't do it. But she stayed because they didn't really have another place to go. Nikki already had tapped out at this point again, and so she kind of put up with it. But it was one instance where the girls got caught shoplifting. It's where all those nice clothes came from, now that I think about it, on why the officer pointed it out, or Nikki bought it for them, I don't know. But she had pointed it out that they had really nice clothes, and their closet was just like, and they got caught shoplifting. But Della, at this point, was just like, I can't do this. So when they ended up in court, Nikki was like, I'll take them. I'll be able to handle them. I'll be able to guide them into something better. And I forgot my primer. Goodness, dang it. And let me know. I don't know if y'all really care about what I'm using. I don't know if y'all care. Let me know if y'all care. I can post it of what I'm using. I can actually either put it on the screen or put it on the description, but let me know. So Nikki, this was in 2010. So they were there with Della for about 5 years, but it was just getting too much for Della to handle. So Nikki was just like, "That's fine. I will take them. They're mine. They're my responsibility." And the girls were completely outraged. They were just fighting the judge, saying like, "Please, please, like, I can't stand this woman. Please don't make us go back with her. I don't want to be with her." And the judge kind of brushed it off like, "You know what? Just give it a 2 week trial. We'll end up revisiting the case in 2 weeks." And the girls were heated. And Nikki was very, Nikki was happy. Like, these were her twins, even though she didn't have the relationship that she wished for, she still always saw these little girls as hers, and they really were her her pride. But she always felt like maybe she could do better and instill in them so that they don't go down the same path as she did. She actually had a welcome home party for these girls coming in, and these girls were just very ugly to her, and they just didn't want to hear her. I guess it was just all the resentment that continued to build up with the not being there for her, for them. Now, back to January 13th of 2010. So this would have happened roughly about the 2 weeks after the judge asked them to wait the 2 weeks. So back on January 13th is when you see Jazz running down the street to flag down this police officer, and they had brought him in, kind of questioning them, asking them what we can do, and they had wanted to watch CSI. And it was said at that point, they did say that something was off with these two girls, and they knew to separate them. They said, "All right, so we're going to end up separating these girls." And you could see when these girls got separated, they were just like, oh, that's when they started like getting anxiety, like, and to think about it, this is your twin sister, like your twin, identical. Y'all have done everything together. Y'all have been side by side since birth, like even through the trauma of being in and out of different homes. Your sister was the only thing consistent. So they knew that was their weak spot. They knew that once they separated them, they would have to swim on their own. And you can clearly see in the beginning, Jazz was crying, saying, "I want my mommy, I want my mom." Like we had, like the remorse. Maybe it was remorse. I don't know, but she was continuing to say, "We fought a lot, but I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want her dead. I say I want her dead all the time, but I didn't mean it." And when they separate them, Jazz got kind of very like, "Why are y'all separating us? Like, do you think we did it? Why are y'all separating us?" And the police officers were just like, "No, it's just protocol. We got to separate y'all. We got to get the stories between y'all." And they did say that when they had noticed that they were crying, both of them, they were crying, there were no tears coming out of these girls' eyes. There was no tears. There was just, them crying out. When Jazz went to the second room, they noticed, they at this point they began to watch their moves, and you can see Jazz kind of scanning the room, and she makes contact with the camera, and as soon as she makes contact with the camera, she starts praying and like crying and rocking and just like, please, please, God, please help them find this person, like um kind of like bring justice to my mom. And they had noticed that the girl had black gloves, and they had never taken them off, like throughout the whole police ride or the interview. They didn't take their gloves off. So at this point they're just like, no, take them off, we got to see what's going on. And you can see Jazz kind of like, well, why, you think we did this? And they're just like, no, like it's just protocol, we need to see what's under the gloves. And as soon as they did, they kind of took in pictures of their arms and their hands, and you can see one of their fingers was slashed. They had multiple bite marks on their arms and their hands. And they were like, well, where is this from? And they said, oh, I fought with my sister. It was from my sister. And they're like, okay. They kind of left it at that. They let the girls go because they didn't have much to go off, but just bites. But they said they had got into it with each other, and they ended up letting the two girls go. Now, Jazz and Taz would end up going back to stay with their grandmother, great grandmother, Della, and they began their lives again, trying to put this behind them. They were again very active in their school. They actually ended up going to prom, and it was just, the end of the year type of things. Meanwhile, the police officers were not done with the crime scene. They began to look into the autopsy. It was said that there was 47 stab wounds, 40 to 750, and that the spinal cord was nearly severed. So they determined it as a crime of passion, that the perpetrator knew the victim, and they kind of always all do. Do you know that it's actually more random that you get unalived by a stranger. So it's kind of like you kind of have to look around your circle, like who's the one that would murder you if it came down to it. Like, I got $20 on the bio, Dad. What's up? anyways, anyways, but it was determined that this was a crime of passion, that she knew who did it. And they ended up going to look at Robert, the truck driver, and Robert was just like, no, I'm on the road, I haven't seen Nikki. And that was true. The Robert was on the road, and the GPS was able to track him down, and that he was nowhere near Nikki at the time. So they ended up looking into the barber, the side piece, Joe Carter. And Joe Carter they said that he didn't do it because he was very caught off guard when he had found out about what happened with Nikki. So they kind of ruled him out. So they start looking back at the twins, and they started, gathering all of the domestic priors to them, and they had cross-examined their hands and the bite marks, and they began looking at the crime scene. There was a towel, like a stack of towels missing, as in they attempted to try to clean this up. They ended up finding boots with bloodstains on them with their mother's hair tucked in the boot, and they were just trying to clean up the crime scene to it. One of the neighbors said that he heard them ringing the doorbell, but he didn't get up to answer it because it was just too early in the morning, and he just didn't want to get up. But he did hear someone crying and screaming, begging for help, and I bet he felt like crap after waking up and realizing like, oh, that was it became a crime scene. But anyways, they had started looking into what the girls had said. They said that they were at school and they actually saw them like 2 hours late arriving at the school, and they had said they had walked there. They actually caught a a ride off a gas station, and then they showed up 2 hours late. They had saw them on the video at their school. So they had figured they had enough to get the girls, or charge the girls at least, that they were the ones that did it. They ended up arresting them on the last day of school just because they didn't want them to go anywhere. They arrested Taz at home and they arrested Jazz at the school, and they had them together in the police officer car. And I guess they had got them both, and they had met up with other police officers, and the girls didn't know that they were being recorded at the time. And at that point you could really start seeing the aggression in the girls. They said, like, as far as like, they're not going to get, they can't just put all of this on a bite mark. They can't just put this all on a bite mark, find a murder weapon, and then charge us. Find a murder weapon. They had brought them in and charged them with first degree, and they actually separated the two girls, and I feel like that was the punishment in itself against separating them, just because they had always been together. Like, that is was each other were their safety blankets. Within 4 months, Taz ended up cracking. Taz ended up asking for a plea deal of a lesser sentence with manslaughter for a 30-year sentence. And they said, maybe if you can give us the full confession. And she said, okay, that's fine. So they ended up bringing her into the room. She began recording her confession. She said that on January 12th, they were both out late. Nikki was actually out drinking, and that the girls actually had to help her inside because she was so drunk. But she had woken up, like, they were all up late, but that they had, Nikki had woke them up very abruptly, like yelling at them, telling them that they need to get up, they're late for school, they need to get their butts to school. And the girls again weren't really having it. They were just like annoyed with her. They didn't want to deal with her. And they got up, they were dressed, and Nikki, she said that Nikki had a pot, and she was a kitchen pot, and she was swinging it at her. And then Jazz is the one with the mole. Jazz was able to get the pot away from Nikki, and that was when Nikki grabbed a knife and just kind of told her, like, back up, don't, like, I'm not, because again, she did have a history of these girls attacking her, so she knew that if she got caught, it would be a done deal. So she had this knife, and she's like, back up. And they hit her with the pot. Nikki was bleeding, and she ended up like lunging at Jazz, and she bit her. She bit her on her chest, and she was hitting her to get her off of her. And Taz was the one that stabbed her, and Nikki kind of, like, the shock of being stabbed, let go. And it was said that Jazz ended up coming back after being bitten, and she ended up began to choke her with one of the medals, one of the ribbon medals that she had won. So she was choking Nikki, and Nikki was able to get out of it. Like, she was able to backhand Jazz. And Jazz, after the ribbon didn't work, she began to help Taz stab her. And this is where they said they dragged her to the bathtub. But I think this is where she would try to go and reach out to the neighbors for help, because she realized, like, oh, like, they're gonna do it. This is it. So I think she went to go run to the neighbors to try to go get the help, being that the neighbors didn't help. And they said they dragged her to the tub, and I think they dragged her from outside is what happened, because you can see the drag marks in on the carpet and into the tub. They said that they filled the tub to warm her up, but I think that they were trying to drown her. That they were trying to warm her up. That's why they filled the tub with water, and she was kind of like hunched over. And I think that they realized that the stabbing wasn't doing the method. So they kind of, I think they drowned her, but the autopsy didn't say that. The autopsy was just saying that there was a crime of passion because of how many stab wounds that she had on her. And then at that point, they said that they had sat there in shock, realizing that they actually did it, and that they were trying to clean up, and they realized that they couldn't clean up, and they were just trying to get their story straight. And they ended up booking it off to school for their alibi, but the school was actually the one that helped the investigators realize that they were lying about it. And when they had asked her, what was your mother telling you throughout this? And she was just saying, I hate you. I hate you. She said that her mother was saying, I hate you. I hate you. And the girls were just saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about it. But they continued to do it. But I don't know. I guess in my opinion, I'm not too sure if that's what Nikki was saying. Maybe it was just the all the emotion pot built up. Maybe she was telling that to the girls, that she did hate them, but also she was their mother. Like, even though they gave their mother hell, she was always like, those are my girls, and I'm gonna get them back. Girls, if y'all have ever been in that type of situation on having to get your child back, like, even though the relationship bond isn't there, you still have that knowledge and that always that core of like, that's my child, that will always be my child, and I'm always going to do for my child. And these girls wanted to push back because they had so much resentment against their mother for not being there for them, and they ended up ending her life. And it's unfortunate, and it was sad. Just even the brother was at the funeral, and the girls were just off at the funeral as well, that they had ended up bringing their boyfriends, and that they were just giggling. And the brother actually confronted them, like, what did you do to my sister? And everyone kind of saw it as like, relax, like, that's not. And they ended up escorting the brother out of the funeral. But he was right. He knew something was up with them. And that concludes the story of today. It's just, the girls are still in prison. They are still separated. They were actually eligible for parole in 2018, but they didn't get it. They'll be out when they're about 47 if they have to stay there for their entire sentence. But they'll still have a life ahead of them. I mean, 47 is not that old, but it's up there. They did take their majority of their life. But I want to know what you think. As always, I want to know what y'all think about it. Well, let me know. I do want to thank y'all for, again, all the support I'm receiving. I'm going to try, guys. We're going to do this, and we're going to stick with it.